I also want to thank Majors and Quinn for having me tonight. Please buy a book tonight. It doesn't have to be mine. You know, look around. You see quite a few amidst, and I can't imagine that there's not something here in this store that won't capture your interest. So please feel free to browse, not now while I'm talking, but later, and see if you can find something and buy a book, because you support an independent bookseller. And I think that bookstores like this are such a treasure in our community. I mean, again, you look around, you can't find this in Amazon, you know, and I just think, like I said, bookstores are a treasure, and I want to help keep them in our communities, so please help support this one. End of commercial. So usually people begin talks like this, or authors begin talks like this, with the origin story, you know, how'd the book come about? Well, in my case, it's kind of embarrassing, because most books are born of ambition. This one was born of sloth. I had this body of work, these articles I'd written about baseball, and I thought, you know, how can I make some more money without having to do any work? And why not put them together in a book? But I must say, this book actually had its beginnings before I wrote any of those articles. It was back when my dad would take me to Met Center as a kid. Sorry, we did take Met Center for North Star games, but he took me to Met Stadium for baseball games, and we watched the Twins, and he passed on his love of the game to me. And it was also, you know, we had 4 kids in our family growing up, and so it was time alone I could spend with my dad. I had him to myself, and for the pace, you know, baseball game, leisurely pace. And what it allows also for the, most people, I think, develop their love of baseball from an elder. And for me, it was my father. And, you know, it's between pitches when that elder explains the game and how the rules of the game, the history of the game, the lore of the game. And it's, I just absorbed that from my father, and picked up his love of baseball. And so that caused me to pursue not only playing the game, umpiring the game, eventually coaching the game when I had kids of my own, and then writing about the game. So this book has a classic baseball. First of all, it has a beautiful cover, I think. I really appreciate what the designers at Roman and Littlefield did. And then I gotta give a shout out to one of the members of the audience here, Neil Carlin, back there, who's also written a ton of books, most recently about Prince, but his books are here throughout the store, so you can buy one of his as well. But Neil was kind enough to blurb the book. Says, John Rosengren's wonderful collection of true-to-the-bone baseball tales soulfully sheds new insight on baseball's biggest themes and most intriguing crannies, in prose that glistens, well, like a perfectly cut diamond. Thank you, Neil. I couldn't have said it better.
Non-fiction
But thank you so much. I do appreciate that. So there are 27 stories in here. There were 28, but we had to cut one when Sporting News found it got some bad press. Anyway, so now there are 28 in here. There were 29. And it's sort of like a smorgasbord. This isn't a book you have to read front cover to back cover. You can open it up and just pick and choose. It's kind of like going to Sunday brunch. You know, there's all this food before you can just grab whatever you like. You know, take the sausage, leave the kale, and whatever appeals to you, you can just pick and choose in it. Some of the highlights in this book is a conversation I had with Harman Killebrew. I recount that. You know, he was, nickname was Killer, but it was ironic because he was one of the nicest guys I ever met and had the chance to talk to. He also said things like he had hit the longest home run in Twins history and at Met Stadium, and the chair you can still see up on the wall. They painted it orange, and it's bolted on the wall in the Mall of America in the amusement park in the middle. Anyway, he said things like, you know, the older I get, or I said, didn't that go something like 504 feet? And he said, no, it went 800 feet. The older I get, the farther it went. So he was a fun guy to talk to. And then Tony Oliva, there's a profile I wrote of him in here. And of course, he's back in the news, having just recently been elected to the Hall of Fame, and I was delighted for that. Probably many of you have also had the chance to meet him, because he's one of those rare players, too, who's still about town, and you run into him at the car wash or at the my brother-in-law who lives in Bloomington says he sees him, you know, at various places running errands. And so, anyway, Tony's such a lovable guy. I'm happy for him being inducted in the Hall of Fame, and then was people write about him here. Bert Blyleven, it's actually his birthday today. Happy birthday, Bert. He's one of the funniest guys, one of the great pranksters in the game. And actually, years ago, he and I talked about writing a book together. And then he decided it was too much work. He didn't want to do it. So we're kind of cut from the same cloth. But he, though he was a better baseball player. He did things like in the opponent's bullpen, he told me a story, I think out in Seattle. He crawled underneath the bleachers in the outfield for quite a stretch, like from the left field foul line all the way to center field, and he gave a hot foot to one of the relief pitchers in the opposing team in the Mariners bullpen. Where he put some matches in the guy's shoe and lights it on fire, lights the lace on fire. I would have loved to do a book with him, but it didn't work out. But anyway, I talked about the time I spent with him at the Twins fantasy camp in here. Kirby Puckett, there's a story about him and his famous Game 6, the 1991 World Series, when he told the guys, get on my back, and I'm going to carry you, and he did in marvelous fashion. And then, of course, we learned more about him as we, the sad, dark side of his troubled personal life came out, and for many, it tarnished his image, and it's sad what we did learn about him and the demons he dealt with. But I think at the same time, those memories are still intact of what he gave us. It's like that's still there for me, that good feeling I got watching Game 6 and then Game 7 of the Twins winning that World Series. So anyway, the story of him is in here. Sandy Kovacs, 1965, Game 1 of the World Series, also happened to be Yom Kippur, so he famously sat out that game. Of course, every rabbi in town, or in the Twin Cities, claims that he was at his synagogue that day. He wasn't. So I tell the story of what actually happened, I think, and through the account of another rabbi in town and his interaction with Sandy Kovacs that day. And then there's some lesser-known stories, too, that were really fun to write, like Mark Hamburger. He pitched for the St. Paul Saints, and he had been a guy who'd been in the major leagues, tested positive for marijuana a couple times, and then went through treatment. And I was sitting in the dugout at CHS Field with him, and he's telling me explaining that tattoo he's got, and these diamonds on his tattoo, and how there are these facets of his spiritual life, and he's getting philosophical. And I was sitting there listening to him, and I was thinking, I could never be having this conversation with Joe Mauer. Much as I like Joe Mauer, great ball player, super nice guy, just didn't have the depth, and very vanilla. And so anyway, Mark Hamburger is one of the great personalities of the game, though below the radar. So I write about him, and then the moments like the Ku Klux Klan played a baseball game against an all-black team in Wichita, Kansas, in 1925, trying to resurrect its image in the state. And it was just this fascinating story as I delved into it. And so that's in here. There's a story about Snowshoe Baseball. And they play that in Rhineland or Lake Tomahawk, Wisconsin, so in the Rhineland area in central Wisconsin. And when I first heard about this, I was so like, Snowshoe Baseball? I was trying to picture this. So I called up the Chamber of Commerce. I said, oh yeah, that's Larry Christensen who does that. So I called him, and he said, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you this. They play it in the summertime. So how do you play Snowshoe Baseball in the summertime? Well, he said, oh, we just spread sawdust through the infield. I said, okay, well, what about the outfield? He said, oh, you can tell the outfielders, they're the guys with the bloodied elbows from falling on the gravel. So I read about Snowshoe Baseball. I read about Dr. Fan, a man named Seth Hawkins from St. Paul, who has, since 1970, when he saw Hank Aaron and Willie Mays hit their 3,000th hit, he's seen every major leaguer since who's reached that milestone, and he is now chasing Miguel Cabrera, who's 13 hits away. And I just talked to him the other day because I'm doing another article about him, and he's just this quirky, interesting character who has this passion for doing this. And I ended up writing about him when he was chasing Alex Rodriguez, who was playing with the Yankees for the New Yorker. And it just kind of fell into place because it was a local source for New Yorker. And then lastly, there's a story about the Baseball Reliquary. Has anyone heard of that? okay, I hope you will at least read that chapter in this book, because it's such a treasure. It's this guy, Terry Cannon, established it, and he had this love of the quirkiness of baseball, and kind of the Cooperstown Hall of Fame honors those who are, the great stars of the game. Well, the Baseball Reliquary honors the characters and oddballs of the game. Mike Beck is their patron saint. And they have, they enshrine people in their Hall of Fame, like Doc Ellis, who pitched a game in curlers for his hair and supposedly pitched a no-hitter while tripping on LSD. And they have people like Steve Dalkowski, who threw harder than anybody else but flamed out before he got to the major leagues. They have enshrined Charlie Brown in their Hall of Eternals, I think they call it. But they also have this traveling show of exhibits, stuff they exhibit, like artifacts. And one of them is a hot dog supposedly half-eaten by Babe Ruth, or the panties. Sorry, kids, close your ears for a moment. The panties that Wade Boggs' mistress wore while he had his hitting streak, and he told her she had to wear them every day because it brought him good luck. They have a hunk of dirt and sod, supposedly from Elysian Fields, where the game began. So it's just a really quirky, fun place, the Baseball Reliquary. So I got to write about that. So I thought I'd just read a few passages for you, and then I'll answer whatever questions you have, comments, stories you want to tell. My friend Rick Fletcher sent me a cartoon the other day, and it's a guy sitting underneath the sign says author reading, and then one person in the audience is saying to the other, "Don't they usually do this out loud?" So I'll read out loud about a guy. You may remember Williams Astudillo. He played for the Twins. He was a utility infielder who developed this cult following, and his nickname was La Tortuga, and so they had a special night for him at Target Field a couple of years ago. And so I won't read the whole thing, but I'm going to read you snippets from it. So it says, Astudillo has become the team's most popular player faster than anybody in Twins history, yet he's not even a regular starter. He's a newbie to the majors, a journeyman minor leaguer, a 27-year-old utility infielder the marketing department esteems more than the manager, who hasn't had the confidence to pencil into the starting lineup this evening. Having a theme night for Williams Astudillo is like feting Jerry Terrell, retiring Al Newman's number, or hosting a Nick Punto party. How did we get here? So I talked a little bit about that, and then I go on to say, the first thing you see when you look at Williams Astudillo is, well, his body. At 5'9", 225 pounds, he looks more like a bowling pin than a professional baseball player. You might say, politely, he's stocky, husky, chunky, short for his weight. Could be the love child of Jack Black and Amy Schumer, a Prince Fielder mini-me, Pluto with a bat, which makes him all the more irresistible. The fan in the stands snarfing nachos from a plastic batting helmet, or the guy on the couch at home with beer in hand, looks at Astudillo and sees himself. He doesn't look like your typical ball player. A fan, Matt Goodman, who's about Astudillo's height, yet slender, told me. He gives a lot of people hope you don't have to be 6'2" and 250 pounds to succeed. Combine that with a rubbery face as flexible and expressive as Al Shack's, framed by a mullet perm that'd be tops in any of John King's hockey hair videos, and talent that pops up all over the field, and you've got the makings of baseball highlight porn. Here's a quick tour. So I go through some highlights that you can see for yourself on YouTube, and I end with this one. But the instant classic, the one that solidified the legend of La Tortuga, comes from September 12 at Target Field. Astudillo's on first when Max Kepler's hit to left center eludes Yankees center fielder Aaron Hicks's dive. Astudillo rounds second and chugs for third. He sheds his helmet along the way, shades of Willie Mays in slow motion. He rounds third, already gassed. With a throw from the outfield heading to the cutoff man, the drama plays out on Astudillo's eloquent face. He's grimacing, biting his tongue, wheeling the luggage of his body forward. His long curls unfurl behind him. He runs and runs and runs. He's gasping. a drowning man fighting for air. The throw reaches the cutoff man, and still Astudillo chugs on. Finally, longer than it took Odysseus to find his way home, La Tortuga slides in safely. After much ribbing from teammates and manager Paul Molitor admitting that was painful to watch, Astudillo said, "I just wanted to show that chubby people also run." So that became his tagline. It's on the front of the giveaway t-shirt above the image of him on his mad dash over the words, "Run, run, run." So that's La Tortuga. There's another, I bought a pop for another section I want to, this is my dad's old glove from when he was a kid, and he ended up, he would wear this when we played catch in our front yard when I was a kid. I have an essay. There's several personal stories in here, but not all of them. I mean, the majority are not about me, so you don't have to read them, the ones about me if you know them. But 4 do involve some personal stories, and so this is one of them. I'll read. It's short. Shortly before my dad died, he gave me his baseball glove. It's one of those leather blobs with thick fingers, a Wilson model, about 70 years old. On the band of leather that wrapped around his wrist, my dad had etched his name, Bill Rosengren, all caps. The B and R have the flourish of his creative side, the former Minnesota Daily cartoonist. The other letters display his impeccable penmanship, the dutiful law student. He used a wood-burning tool whose mark would endure longer than a pen's ink. The glove, worn and aged, has preserved his personality. I imagine the glove new, dark brown, aromatic leather. My dad, 13, 14 years old, tenderly rubbing oil into the pocket. I picture that boy, the skinny kid with short blonde hair I know from black and white photographs, scooping ground balls with that lumpy glove, clapping his free hand over the pocket to trap the ball. He played in a park near Minnehaha Falls. A road has since erased the field, but his stories about the games linger. My favorite is of the kid who slugged a ball that crashed into the popcorn cart past left field, breaking glass and scattering players, except for the batter, who gleefully rounded the bases before fleeing the popcorn bin. In another photograph, this one from the early 50s, my dad poses with his Navy shipmates in baseball uniforms, the glove resting on his knee. He played second base in a tournament against Alaskan teams during his ship's tour. I hardly recognized the young man, front row, second from the left, with several days' growth of beard. As my father, he was always clean-shaven. I marvel that he had lived almost half of his life before I knew him. Pondering that glove today, I'm curious about the time he bought it, probably with money from his paper route. Was he one of the first among his buddies to have a glove? One of the last? When someone dies, things we never thought to ask assume a sudden importance and stoke in us a desire to know, as though that knowing would bring the lost one closer to us, would ease the separation brought by death, soften its permanence. This ache to know our parents often visits us too late. Yet had it come earlier for me, I'm not sure it would have been satisfied. My dad was a difficult man to get to know, a Swede who could go long stretches without speaking. Born in 1934, he was native to a generation of men who did not discuss their emotions. He shared some memories, but not about his father, who disappeared on drinking binges, not about his mother, bitter about working to pay her husband's gambling debts. So often, that's the way it is. We're left with a view from the outside, wishing we could know what it was like inside. Today, I picked the glove off my shelf and slide my hand into it. Part of the beauty of an old leather glove is the way it shapes to one's hand, formed by so many days of sunshine and sweat. The glove does not fit me the way it did my dad. It's stiff in places, short in the fingers, wide in the palm. I'm surprised to feel deep inside the fingers. The leather has broken open, and the ragged edges chafe my skin. The exposed padding is soft, tender. It seems I have stumbled upon a secret, something intimate I had not known. Maybe my dad knew I would, and this was his way of letting me glimpse what it had been like to be him. So that's my dad's glove. There's one more I want to read for you about Rod Carew. I mentioned, and I had a chance to go to Twins Fantasy Camp, and I got this jersey there, free for $4,000. Actually, I scammed my way into that too. I didn't pay. I got an assignment. Actually, I got 2 assignments, one from Sports Illustrated, one from Twin Cities Business, to write about the Twins Fantasy Camp. And so I got to go for free. You can try this too. Amazed at the doors that open when you tell someone you're a reporter. Anyway, so, Rod Carew was my favorite player when I was a kid, but I just thought there's no way I can wear 29 in a Twins jersey. It was just too much pressure. So I took 13, which was the number John Roseborough wore, because I wrote a book about him too. And so that was the number he wore for the Twins when he played, is 68 and 69. I think he wore 8 for a few months and then switched to 13. But anyway, so I got an email the other day from a guy who was complaining about Sandy Kovacs. He said he was, had cancer, and his wife reached out to Sandy Kovacs, his boyhood hero, and asked, "Hey, will you send my husband a note or something?" And no response from Sandy Kovacs. So this guy was really down on Sandy Kovacs. So I sent him this bit on Rod Carew that from here that I'd written, because it's perhaps the antithesis of that. And and then sometimes it helps me when I have kind of a negative opinion about someone to hear a positive story about them as well, which I've had the fortune of having too. So I'll read this a little bit and then I'll be done. So I was still apprehensive about approaching my boyhood hero when Rod Carew showed up in our dugout. We at the fantasy camp, we're playing games, so I'm playing a game, and Rod Carew shows up. Here was the Twins' 7-time batting championship, whose unusual stance we all used to imitate, now standing 5 feet from me. Do I tell him I'm a writer? No, that might put him on the defensive. He never liked the press. Yeah. Do I say, I used to pretend I was you? No, that might creep him out. So I just waited and tried not to stare like an idiot. Serendipitously, he asked, "What's the score?" 3-1, us, I said. See that woman playing second? She was up with the score tied 1-1, bases loaded, 2 outs, 2 strikes, and she blooped a single to right, much like Rod Carew would have done. He smiled. This was going well. Drove in 2 runs. When the next batter asked for some quick dry to be spread in the batter's box where the dirt was mushy, she told Frank Viola, coaching first, "That's why I shit my pants." That cracked up Carew. I survived that critical first impression. Sorry, parents. They say you shouldn't meet your heroes. Few men can measure up to the illusions we've created of them, but Carew withstood the test. At dinner, I had the chance to chat casually with him, asking if it was true he used to practice his bunting by laying down a towel as a target during batting practice. Yes, a face towel, he told me. If it was true about learning to steal home. Yes, he said. Twins manager Billy Martin knew we would have some close games and wanted me to be able to do that to help win them. And whether he was safe an eighth time in 1969, which would have broken Ty Cobb's record for most times stealing home in a single season. Yes, he said. The catcher dropped the ball between his legs, but the ump stumbled and wasn't in position to see it. Finally, I asked him if it was weird having middle-aged men wearing jerseys with his number. When I see them smile, the way their faces light up, I feel good that I can do that for them, he said thoughtfully. Isn't that what it's all about? Being able to spread joy? After dinner, Carew presented Mark Hague, a camper with leukemia in remission, an autographed jersey. Carew lost his youngest daughter to leukemia in 1996 when she was only 18 years old. That inspired his cause to raise awareness and money for cancer research, which has given guys like Mark Hague a far better chance of survival. The two had met the day before when Hague waited in the corner for the long line of guys wanting Carew's autograph to clear, then told Carew his story. The father who had buried his daughter spoke to the younger man with compassion and encouragement. When I walked out of there, it gets me overclumped. When I walked out of there with tears in my eyes, I realized that Rod Carew, the baseball player, had been my childhood hero, Mark told us. I found out yesterday, Rod Carew, the man, is my real life hero. So, But I'm not done yet. Please don't go. Don't go. So I actually ran into Carew at the Twin Cities airport, I don't know, maybe 6 months after this camp or something. And I told him that story of how much it meant for me to hear that. And he just, humbly and graciously accepted that. And it was just, again, an affirmation for me of what a quality guy he is. So I wanted, that's classic baseball. I also wanted to just point out that, in case you missed it, The Fight of My Lives was my last book. And this is the one that tells the story of Juan Marshall clubbing John Roseboro in the head with his bat. Famous incident. It's a picture many of you have probably seen. But I tell the story of what was going on in their lives before that happened, and then how they eventually reconciled, which was when I heard that story, was what really made it a story of substance. And I wrote an article about it first, and that's in here, but then I was so taken by the story that I expanded into a full book, and so that's here. And then finally, there's several stories about Hank Greenberg in here, and again, I first wrote an article about him and his comeback in 1945. He was one of the first from the first of the player. He was the first star to return from the war and play baseball. Many of guys like Bob Feller, Ted Williams, Stan Musial returned in 1946 at the start of the season. Greenberg came back in 1945, and of course, baseball had. Franklin Delano Roosevelt had written the famous green letter saying, "Let's keep playing. It's important in the nation to have baseball." But the quality had gone way down with one-arm players and 15-year-old pitchers and retired violinists who were playing, and so all these scrubs just weren't as good, and the game was lousy or not up to its previous levels before the stars left. And so when Greenberg came back, as the war was winding down in summer 1945, people were looking to baseball for healing and a sense of normalcy to return. And he was the test case. Could he perform to the same levels prior to the war, and could the other players then as well? And would the game be restored to what we once knew it to be? And so I wrote an article about that. And again, I learned enough about him to think, I think there's a book here. And so I did that. I wrote this book called The Hero of Heroes, which is the biography of Greenberg. So if you missed that one's here too. But like I said, if you could just buy any book in the store, please do, because it's good for the bookstore. So I want to thank you again for coming out, and I'd be glad to answer whatever questions you have or reminiscence you might have. Yes, Mr. Custer, the good-looking gentleman in the front row.
The Hank Greenberg book, which I read, was very, very good.
Can you say that louder, please? Can you speak up?
That book is very, very good. So how long did it take you to write a book like that, and how many interviews did you do, and how did you know that you had enough information, interviews to say this is it?
Well, good question. And what happened was I wrote a proposal, which is kind of drill. You got to write a sample chapter and outline, and then my agent took it to try to sell it. And between the time I wrote this proposal and a publisher bought it, this was Penguin, an imprint of Penguin who published it. But before they actually bought it, I learned that there's another guy, Mark Kalansky, who's a much better known writer than me, working on a biography of Hank Greenberg. And I thought, I've got to outdo Mark Kalansky. Like, I thought, I've got to write a better book, because otherwise no one will read mine. And fortunately, the publisher bought it and gave me the contract, but I set out to, it's kind of the best spirit of competition to outdo Mark Kalansky. And so I went all out, and I talked to as many people as I could. I mean, probably scores of people. I don't know the exact count. Read everything I could, went to Detroit, went to Cooperstown, went to all over. Actually, Jim, you were telling me about the Louisville Museum, right? Mm-hmm. I went back in their vault and saw Hank Greenberg's bat, the model, that they used for it, and a contract that they'd given them. They used to give guys $1 for their contract to these to use their names on the bats and stuff. He got a set of golf clubs and $25. He was a skilled negotiator. Anyway, so I did. I listened to old broadcasts. I read everything I could. Libraries everywhere, and it took probably 3 years of intensive research before I felt like, okay, I got the manuscript now to write this book. And I'll let readers be the judge, or the public to decide. But I think I met my mark anyway. It was that loud crack of the bat, that solid feeling that I got. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, Jim.
So John, it's kind of a two-part question. One, what's your favorite baseball movie?
Mm.
And whether or not it's Field of Dreams,
Yeah.
that's such a romantic movie. Do you think that raises people's expectations too much?
Of what? Raises expectations.
Well, there's so much mythology around baseball anyway.
Yeah.
That thing just seems to feed the fire.
Right. Well, absolutely. Now with Major League playing a game there at that field. So yeah, actually, Field of Dreams is one of them. I mean, Bull Durham is up there. Because I was born in 1964, Bad News Bears, Tatum O'Neal, who I think was 12 when I was 12, and so I had a crush on her. And that bad boy, the guy who rides the motorcycle, the talent. I mean, sentimentally, that was a fun movie then. Period film. But yeah, Field of Dreams does raise the level. There's a sentimentality to baseball, but for me, that's part of the nostalgia, part of the allure of the game. It's the I'm a member of SABR, the Society of American Baseball Research, but there are two types of people in that organization. One are the statisticians, like the really smart people who analyze figures or stats and stuff, and then there are the people who just love the game and are into the culture of the game. And that's where I fall in that camp. And so, it's a movie like Field of Dreams. Of course, I'm going to go back and see it again and again. Yeah.
So should we
The
meet
author-
our heroes or should we not meet our heroes? I mean,
Well,
most definitely not meet our heroes.
If your hero is Rod Carew, yes. Kirby Puckett, maybe not. What about, Prince? Should you meet your hero?
Well, I'm name dropping name.
It's funny, I was about to say, I got my, meeting Willie Mays, who was my hero,
Yeah.
broke my heart. And he had said before, he said every hero he ever had broke his heart except Muhammad Ali. It was interesting.
Where'd you meet Mays? What was the sort
I
of...
was doing a story for Esquire.
Okay.
And all he had to do, it's your book, I'm sorry.
No, but how old was he at the
All
time?
he had to do was not be a complete asshole.
Yeah.
And I would have written a tough piece.
Yeah.
And
But he
of
was.
course, it turns out he's famous, but also the world turned him.
Yeah.
I wish I had. I wish I
Right.
had listened. I wish I
Well,
not.
Yeah,
Okay, I don't wanna be
I feel the same way about Willie Mays. That's why I asked you, because I met Willie Mays and wish I hadn't, because it was on the streets of Cooperstown, and I met the guy who was like driving around and stuff, and told him I'd written this book. It was another book about the '73 season where Willie Mays' story features prominently, and so I was just wanting to give him a copy of the book, and he was kind of confused by the interaction, and he said, "I don't want to buy any book." I was like, the guy that was with him said, no, he's giving it to you. It's a gift. But Willie still didn't quite understand it. And he was probably 80 at the time. But what was so sad about not only that his mind was going, but here was this guy who was, I think, the greatest baseball player of all time, the quintessential five-tool player who could do it all better than anybody. And his body was failing him. His eyesight was bad. His hearing was bad. And he was kind of just stumbling along, shuffling along in the street, and it broke my heart because I didn't want to remember Willie Mays that way. I didn't want that to be my last experience of Willie Mays. I wanted to remember him, flying around second base with his hat falling off, or making that catch in the '54 World Series and wheeling and throwing. That's the Willie Mays I want to remember and marvel at, not the old guy. But it's our heroes grow up, I guess, too. So. Yeah, I guess it's too if we balance that with they're fully dimensional people.
How dare they?
Yeah, right. Good question. Yes.
So with baseball, it is such an amazing sport, and so many rules haven't changed over the years, which makes it great. But a lot of rules have changed,
Yeah.
or should change. What do you, just on the shift? What's your opinion on the shift in defensive baseball?
It's funny because just Monday night I was watching a Twins spring training game with a buddy at his house, and we were having this conversation. And it seems to me it's a good defensive move. They first started, with Ted Williams, because he used to pull the ball so famously and couldn't hit to the opposite field. And so it was like a sure thing. And so it seemed like a smart defensive move. Now everyone's complaining that, oh, it's taking away hits or offense, but it's like, why not bunt? Why not hit to the opposite field, you know? And I know you don't want your cleanup hitter to be bunting necessarily, but if he does that 3-4 times, and maybe managers say, well, fine, I'll take a single from there. I'll let this guy be on first base. But it just seems like there are other ways that we could adapt to it. I don't like Major League Baseball saying, you can't do this as a defensive measure. So that's just again, as a sentimental fan, my perspective. I thought you were going to ask about the DH rule since then, and I was doing away with that. And I actually, in my book about the '73 season deals with that. One of the storylines is of Orlando Cepeda, who was the first guy hired as a DH because in 1973 was when the American League instituted the designated hitter rule. And so it allowed guys like Orlando Cepeda or Tony Oliva to continue their careers. And so in that regard, I thought, as a fan, I don't mind that, seeing guys like Tony Oliva. It allowed me as a kid to watch Tony Oliva for a few more years. But I also like the strategy of, okay, pitcher's coming up, what are you going to do? And, how long are you going to leave him in the game? Can he bunt? Can he hit? I mean, that's a great thing. Like, who was it? I think Ken Brett had a 5-hit game. George Brett's brother was a pitcher. And, there are the pitchers who sometimes hit a home run to win the game. I love that storyline when it plays out. Now, it's not often. Usually it's kind of pathetic to watch a pitcher bat. But it's still, it adds a layer of strategy to the game that I kind of like. But, I liked it when you had it. The American League had the designated hitter and the National League didn't, so you could get some of each. So now I'm bummed that we were all going one way. Yes, the writer in the back.
When you write about baseball, who do you picture as your audience? Is it people who already love baseball, or are you trying to write for anybody, even if they don't know baseball?
Well, that's a good question. It depends on the publication and who's going to be reading the publication. Like some of these articles are for Memories and Dreams, which is the publication of the Baseball Hall of Fame. So I know these are diehard baseball fans who already have a base level of knowledge that I can then build on, and I don't have to explain things. If I'm writing for the New Yorker or a general interest magazine, I feel like I have to be more, maybe explain some more stuff or just, I guess either one, I'm interested in the culture and the personality, and I think that is of interest to anybody too, so they don't have to be a diehard baseball fan. But there are moments when, like I might not go too inside baseball for a general interest magazine, but if I am writing about, or for Memories and Dreams, I might, to be able to, indulge that. And, ask those questions there, delve into those subjects that only people who care about baseball are interested in. Others, my wife's eyes glaze over. Like, look at her now. No, I'm just kidding. Yes. The writer in front. It's so nice to see so many authors. This is Tim Brady from St. Paul. His books are in this in here too. You can find them all over. Maybe in the history section. If they're not, I'm going to talk to you.
John, how do you keep? As an old timer myself, I have trouble even recognizing the names of modern major leaguers. And I certainly don't have the hero worship that I had for the guys who were kids when I was a kid.
Yeah.
How do you keep abreast of that sort of change and writing about Major League Baseball?
Well, it's harder, I think, because when I was a kid, guys stayed on the same team longer, and I collected baseball cards, so that's kind of how I got to know who was who and who's on what team. I don't do that anymore, and guys move around more, so it's harder to keep up with them. There are more teams now. So it's more of a challenge. But I think it's when I hear a story about a guy, or there's a dynamic, like Garrett Cole and Josh Donaldson last year when they're having sparring, and Donaldson was complaining about Cole, and Cole as the pitcher, they were going back and forth, and then the fact that Donaldson gets traded to the Yankees, I'm just curious now to see how are they going to be his teammates. And those sorts of things, those storylines pique my curiosity more than the number of spin rotations and can the Twins, or the pitch counts, or watching that. But so I think that's when I get hooked into a drama playing out in the game, or a personality on a team, like, Williams Astudillo, like every time he came to bat, or then, I don't know, last year he'd pitch when the Twins were getting blown out, and he'd throw like 45 miles an hour. Then, or sometimes he even burned one in at 80. And those moments I find so enthralling. That's what captures my interest and keeps me watching the game. And I can't name the whole roster. I can't even tell you name the Twin starting rotation for tomorrow, or Friday. But I can, those dramas, the personal side are what keep me interested, I guess. Yeah, thanks. Yes.
As leadership changes, as collective bargaining changes, will people 60 years from now be doing this same kind of retrospective of memories, events, being enthralled? Will they have the same opportunity?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question, I think. But I would have to say that, like, the stars of today, I think, will have an enduring quality. Like, we're watching Ohtani right now, right? And actually, I bought a ticket, especially, this is the guy for the Angels who pitches and is a hitter and was the MVP last year. And, he's kind of like the second coming of Babe Ruth via Japan. And so I remember looking at the Twins schedule last year when I saw the Angels were coming to town. I bought a ticket, I'm going to go see him. And so I think there will be players like that will have an enduring quality and interest. And maybe there'll be watershed moments, too, where people will say, when the game changed, like, how is this pro-com going to change the game with the catcher punching in a button and then the pitcher hearing his voice, fastball inside or curve blown away. It's like, maybe that'll have an impact on the game and be a watershed moment, and that will be something people will be looking back on. Or when the National League implemented the DH rule. I don't know, but I think there are probably, I hope that baseball will endure too, and that so people will be interested 60 years from now. But I don't have a crystal ball. It's a guess. Yeah. Maybe time for one more? Yes.
John, you mentioned in your introduction that you did a little bit of umpiring.
Yeah.
Have you ever written an article on an umpire or umpiring or the state of umpiring in baseball?
I haven't. I've thought there's several things I'm curious about with umpiring. Like, apparently concussions are a concern, and CTE, and that is of interest to me. But also then just the heat that umpires get, and umpires have figured into different characters and books I've written, but I haven't written specifically an article about it. Why? Do you have one in mind?
Well, I was just thinking about Durwood Merrill's book. You're out and you're ugly too.
That's a great title.
Yeah, I remember one time when center field camera at Briggs Stadium was behind the pitcher and Kirby Puckett was up.
Yeah.
And the pitcher threw a ball about that far inside, and Durwood Merrill was behind home plate and called him out.
Yeah.
And Puckett just started laughing. And he laughed all the way back to the dugout.
Because it was obvious what a bad call.
Yeah. But Merrill had a good sense of humor too about it.
Yeah. Well, there's certain personalities like that, different umps that Shea Crawford was one that come to mind that just, they added something to the game. Like I guess you'd probably say a good umpire is like a crystal glass. You drink wine from the glass and you're not paying attention to the glass, but then you're just appreciating the wine. But then when you're done, you might look at the glass and say, "Oh, that's beautiful glass." An umpire's the same way. It's like you don't want to notice them, right? They shouldn't be a factor. But there are certain personalities that kind of enhance it and make it more entertaining. Yes. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap it up. If you have other questions, feel free to ask me. I'll be over here signing books. Please browse, find something you like. But again, thanks so much for coming out. It's great to see all of you, and I really appreciate you being here.